Welcome, everybody. I'm Gwell66, and this is a review series on Attack on Titan, Season 4, the final season. I've got a longer preamble than I want. I know you want to get to the good stuff, so time codes, and I'm going to talk fast. Think you can keep up? Okay. First of all, I'm Gwell66, and we're going to be reviewing each episode as it comes out, maybe do a little manga comparison, talk about the characters, themes, art, you name it. No spoilers in regards to future events. If you're here to see someone who goes, oh my god, 10 out of 10, every new episode is the Attack on Titan version of the Reigns of Castamere. If you want someone who orgasms on camera and has not one single negative thing to say, then this is not the channel for you, this is not the video for you. If you're here for an honest review that aims to be objective and detailed as much as I can be, something that really nails down what works, what doesn't, and why, then this is for you. I don't just want you to hear me summarize what happened, I want you to walk out of each episode with knowledge tucked under your arm that can help you think about and engage with the media you consume on a deeper level. Because the work Hajime Isayama puts into every detail, this series absolutely demands your full undivided attention. What's more, by going over what the creator is doing and why, I want you to be able to utilize these to become a better writer or creator yourself. That's enough preamble. Way back in the 1900s, there is this now unheard of series called Metal Gear Solid. It was a revolutionary game at the time in terms of advancing the stealth genre and using top-notch voiceover to push a deep, engaging plot filled with memorable characters. Chief among them, fans fell in love with the main character, Solid Snake. So when MGS2 came out, fans were dying to jump back into the story with the character they know and love. And they did! For about 20 minutes. Then you're given control of some other character. Fans hated it. The game itself was so amazing it still won them over, but the character, perhaps unfairly, never stood a chance. To the point where he was openly booed by fans at expos. And the idea of fan service in MGS3 was to have an identical looking character 40, 50, 60 years in the past who gets his ass beat mercilessly. For those of you who have seen Attack on Titan Season 4 Episode 1, I'm sure you know why I'm drawing this parallel. The characters we know, love, and have followed for almost 60 episodes are replaced. Gone. Nowhere to be seen. How are these new characters introduced? And does their introduction work? Why or why not? Short summary of the action. War. We see a child's life is in immediate danger, and his older brother, Colt, rushes to pull him out of it. We get to see several character dynamics, while the amnesia trope is used to give them an excuse to exposit what's going on. There's been a war for 4 years. This is the decisive battle. They're candidates to replace the Armor Titan. We also see Magath, a commander belonging to the Marleyan race. And we learn a little bit about his character due to the way he interacts with the Eldians under his command. They also reference the Armored Titan and the Beast Titan, talk about who will be inheriting Reiner's Titan, and there's a promise of Titan involvement soon enough. They also talk about Colt inheriting the Beast Titan. So let's make a little list of concepts used in that introduction that help pull us in. What is it that makes us want to engage with these characters and their story instead of screaming for the devils we know? Teasing out details over time, connecting to previous characters, playing with senses, child endangerment, action and violence, comedy, personalities, horror, more specifically the horrors of war, and last but not least, intrigue. First, let's talk about teasing out details. This tool actually is used prior to this episode. There are more than enough theory videos and theory posts to last a lifetime for this series, and that's because we've always been shown things like ancient texts that hint at a larger world of salt water and lands of fire and ice. The mere existence of Titans, which leaves us naturally wondering, well, where'd the Titans come from? We've seen other supernatural elements as well, like flashbacks. Go back to early episodes. What is going on in these vague flashes of memory Eren had in early episodes? Do you know? I don't know. The characters don't know either. It's a mystery. Intrigue. We want to learn more at that point in time. As the series progresses, Reiner, Bert, Ymir, even Zeke, they all hint at outside tribes and greater forces at work beyond our main character's comprehension. One great way to look at writing. If you want to engage your audience, you aren't just entertaining them, you're teaching them about your characters, the world they inhabit, and the situations they find themselves in. If you make your audience want to learn about your world and its characters, then you could get away with a lot, including giant exposition dumps or flashbacks that wouldn't fly in most other media. By the way, I'm not saying never do this, but prolonged flashback and flash-forward chapters being used at the very beginning of a series or book is often frowned upon. Prevailing wisdom is, if your story starts at an interesting place and time, then that is where we should stay. Try not to suck us in with how awesome Christmas is in Chapter 1, only to suck us out of it and send us all the way back to September in Chapter 2. For comparison's sake, let me bring up the fact that Attack on Titan does do the mildest of flash forwards in the first few seconds of the very first episode. So why does that one work? It's because it's a tease. It's a tease that is paid back fairly quickly within the first episode. It also doesn't give away any significant future details. Imagine if episode 1 had started with this war scene. We get all the way up to them showing Reiner in the plane, and then we cut all the way back to Eren as a child waking up from his dream and crying. Not only would several enduring mysteries about the show and its world be ruined right off the bat, but it would have taken us an eternity to make it back to this point. You have to earn your flashbacks and time skips, or be very conservative with how you tease them. Less is more when you want to generate interest and intrigue early in a series or new arc. For example, Falco pretty quickly references flying around with a sword, fighting titans. We don't see it. We don't dwell on it. It's a very small tease that probably spawned days of theory crafting videos and hundreds of posts within a day. Let the audience engage with the tease. Leave them wanting more. You've whispered to us with this line, and we're leaning in because we want to learn more. We want to find out what's going on with this kid. Part of this is also that we are now connecting to previous characters in a multitude of ways. We've seen previous characters have visions, and we've seen the unique conditions that usually have to be present for a character to experience visions. One other interesting aspect of this is that, unlike in earlier episodes, the audience actually knows more than the character receiving the vision. We know who the sword-carrying people are, and we know about Titan visions and the types of people who receive them. But at the same time, we don't know which character's eyes he was seeing out of. Was he simply around other characters who could fly around with swords? Will he be kidnapped at some point or defect from the army? Or you sit there and you go, oh my God, is he going to eat someone we know and love? So simultaneously, we get to feel a little bit like we're the authority on the situation, while also being left bewildered, confused, and worried. We're being whispered to and engaged intellectually and emotionally. We don't just reference characters in previous events, we have established characters directly involved. Magath, Reiner, and Zeke are all here, so we aren't being asked to dive into a completely new group of unfamiliar individuals. Car Titan's here too, but thus far we really don't have much of a connection to this character, other than visceral hate, thanks to the events in the Return to Shiganshina arc. With Reiner, Zeke, and his backstory, we already have several tethers pulling us into the events of this war. Imagine we're fish. The concepts of Marley, warrior candidates, and some of the characters are hooks attached to lines, and each hook makes it easier to reel us in. Let's talk about playing with our senses. What's interesting is there's a bird flying, and they use sound very sparingly. There's this background noise used to build a sense of unease. There's a key about human psychology. When someone is screaming something or being obnoxious, what's your instinct? You may watch what's happening, but you also pull away. I don't want someone loudly screaming in my ear. Similarly, if you overwhelm an audience, they may instinctively shut down because there's just too much going on, too loud of an opening, and you risk being at least partially tuned out. Some of you may be saying, "Oh, hey, he referenced this earlier, didn't he?" Yes, you are correct. I mentioned whispering. So let me ask you, astute viewer, do you know what happens when someone is whispering to you as opposed to screaming in your ear? You lean in. You engage yourself with the conversation, or with the material in this case. You're trying to take in more of it because there's so little being supplied, rather than doing your best to keep it at arm's length while it screams at you. Again, let's lightly compare to episode number 1, because I find it fascinating that there are so many similar techniques that are used. Parallels to episode 1 goes beyond even the fact that there's a bird. Well, the sound is similarly gimped. Falco's on the ground. There's this ringing, which allows the audience to engage and fill in the blanks. Just in case it wasn't obvious, you then see Mappa show off their ragdoll physics with another explosion. This all gives you some neat insight into the school of story introduction that Isayama either literally or metaphorically attended, that he would use some of these similar things both in episode 1 and in this flash-forward episode that starts us with completely new characters. Next tool, child endangerment. I don't think I'm going out on a limb when I say that people are naturally, instinctively invested in seeing a child pulled out of danger. I don't think that point really needs much expansion. It's basic, it taps into something visceral in us, and it works more often than not. To that same effect, having bodies flying and people sprinting from a hailstorm of bullets, that's also engaging on an instinctual level. Though, in fairness, bullets flying is kind of old hat in entertainment at this point. And the way it's done here, I don't think that action and violence alone would really be enough to justify pulling us away from our favorite characters if it wasn't for all the other stuff that I've mentioned so far. And can I just say, man, Colt is a piece of shit. He could have held his brother in front of him by hugging him, and instead, he puts him on his back. Facing the gunfire, he's clearly using him as a meat shield. Eldians truly are the devil. He's also very lucky that he doesn't get hit. And I hate when mere dumb luck gets a character to survive. 100% of the time I see it, it takes me right out of whatever I'm watching. Now, I'm not throwing my hands up in disgust. Usually just smirking. Maybe a slight eye roll. The more a series or show dips into this well, though, the more I disengage, which you don't want. Not to mention, this is a chance to show character resourcefulness. It's a chance to have a character fight against the odds and earn the hero moment. I wish he was maybe shown darting between objects, hurling himself between a mound of dirt. Then he uses a few grenades to kick up clouds of dust that obscure the enemy vision. Instead, here he just runs and magically doesn't get hit. And then hilariously, this happens. my boy Colt, he doesn't just trip on nothing like an uncoordinated goober. This dude straight up knocks himself unconscious based on what we're seeing here. Next inheritor of the Beast Titan, folks. Elegant as a colt. Graceful as a news reporter stomping grapes.
Say, stop! Oh, stop, I can't breathe, stop. Oh, no, oh
boy,
dear.
I think she's actually hurt.
No.
Then we see here, he doesn't appear to be recovering from getting knocked out. Wait, okay, why'd he lie there and sell his fall like it was death? just an odd choice, and a sequence that falls a bit flat for me on the whole. Thank God this first episode of this arc did not rely on the violence and action to pull us in, because thus far at this point, it's really not done a good job, and it would have left a very sour taste, I think, in people's mouths if this was all that there was. But again, there's so much more that I've obviously talked about, and there's more that I will be talking about that really kind of covers for where this falls flat in these early couple of moments. We are at war, so even though the violence and action kind of falls flat in my eyes right now, there is more action to come, and maybe that will fare a bit better in my eyes. Man, okay, talked about personality, right? I love this shot. This shot really helps suggest some key character differences between the two. Body language and facial features are key, folks. Look at the face of the second in command right here. Eyes partially closed. Cheeks almost kind of curled a little bit. This look of disdain on his face. He clearly has no shits to give the Eldian people. Commander Magath literally and metaphorically has his eyes open. Yeah, he reminds Colt of his place as an Eldian, but you get the feeling the other guy may have just shot him for insubordination. Magath clearly values the words he's hearing and has established at least a willingness to hear from even Eldians. What's more, he chastises Colt, trying to teach him, trying to make him better, imploring him to learn what it means to be a leader. He's teaching him, and perhaps he's actually projecting. Considering how they're discussing the need to sacrifice countless lives, it leaves you wondering if perhaps maybe it really hurts Magath to have to make the sacrifice play. When you establish a clear willingness to work with people, it can't be easy to harden yourself to the fact that you have to be the one to make the call to sacrifice them so callously. So many layers of character development are being stacked one on top of the other here for both guys. Let's learn more about personalities. Since we're here, each character gets a chance to speak.
ファルコ、酔っ払ってんの？頭を強く打ったんだね。俺たちが4年も戦争してるってこと覚えてるか？
It's a concise way to hear them and get a feel for them. Sophia has a low, almost sullen cadence. There's a detached aloofness that's reminiscent of Annie. Gabby is sharp, assertive, and confident. She's very direct as well. It gives me almost a confident, like, Naruto vibe. I half expected her to say Tatabayo at the end of that sentence. Now, Udo has a softer, slightly inquisitive, everyman kind of voice.
Sophia! お前あの海軍に何が期待できるってんだよ。制海権を奪うのに4年もかけやがった無能の声だめだぞ。お前！
He's also a little bit socially awkward based on the dialogue, but that might be because they're taking the opportunity to do a little more with Udo than just have him speak. They're trying to have him exposit awkward dialogue. Still, though, as this person put it, clunky. Of course, it's one way to establish that Falco is out of it, but then Falco goes and establishes that he's out of it by asking this, which makes the first thing unnecessary. Exposition can be janky and jarring if it's something a normal person wouldn't say in this situation. And in that regard, even for exposition, this is something that really doesn't feel too natural. I feel like perhaps a commander issuing orders may have been more effective. Like this scene, right here, kind of a, "Men, this is it. Our 4-year war hinges on the success of this mission." Blah, 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 blah. Something that sets the table that the kids would overhear, and then Falco could kind of comment on it. It's still clunky here when Udo jumps in to explain the naval failure, but what I like is that I do feel it's necessary to address the naval issue. Isayama, or maybe his editors, have this ability to reflect on their own work and imagine what questions we might ask as fans. And I did enjoy how he takes the opportunity to address this question in a way that also allows us a little bit of levity, with perhaps slightly socially awkward Udo going a little haywire here. Still a little bit clunkified. Perhaps Falco could have overheard the captain mention a 4-year war and Fort Slava, so he asks the other kids why the Navy failed. Then Udo jumps in. Slight tweaks here. Less chance to pull people out of the episode through forced exposition. When Gabby rears up and says this,
そりゃ、一から作戦を説明し直さなきゃだね。耳だけ貸してな、ファルコ。
I have expected her to turn into a chibi and start pointing at diagrams, but I've harped on how unnatural all this dialogue is enough. You can't get everything right. I tell you what they do knock out of the park. I felt so awful for these men. Signs of trauma, shell shock, aka PTSD. This man can hardly stand, and the captain establishes why they do this. Redemption. A redemption that they've all been brainwashed into fighting for on behalf of Marley. It's all pretty sad and terrible, and really kind of hit me in the gut. So when you see Reiner develop a kind of split personality, and when you see what those children did to Shiganshina, it makes so much more sense. I mean, what an environment. What a up indoctrinating and cultish childhood they had to endure.
エルディア人の運命を背負い、私たちを苦しめるあの島の悪魔どもを皆殺しにする覚悟だ。そうするのは善良なエルディア人だけだと。 この戦いに勝って世界に証明する。私は負けない。私が収容区からみんなを解放する。
We see through Gabby's near religious zealot speech that Marley has sunk its claws into her, just as they did with Reiner. These kids are gunning for the armored titan. Okay, now we're getting into some shit. This armored tank train comes a-rolling out. And surprisingly, we see that Marley is reluctant to release its titans for fear of getting them killed. We get some more dialogue between Magath and Colt to establish that the Titans and the Warriors just have enormous importance as investments. Gabby, driven by her need to prove that she's a good Eldian, gladly offers up her life with a daring plan, one that Magath stone cold refuses to entertain. Gabby, though, proves to be fairly perceptive and puts her commander on the spot, daring him to openly admit that he values a single Eldian child above 800 other soldiers' lives. When Magath relents, he does so with almost a sad resignation. His head bows, as if pulled by the weight of the lives he so readily has to sacrifice. You know, I mentioned some tonal clashes earlier. On one side of Magath are men shaking in terror, nearly devoid of the will to live. Also on this side, the second in command is harshly barking orders, demanding that they prepare to commit suicide for the glory of Marley. On the other side, we have children, almost playing at being soldiers. I mean, Colt tries to talk no jutsu his way out of 800 soldiers dying. Udo can afford to be a goofball. Sophia gets to be aloof and detached, as if they're at school recess and she just doesn't want to be bothered with the lamoid kids. And Gabby gets to put on the pouty lips, bat her eyes, and talk about how oh so adorable she is. Believe it or not, this is not criticism. Where I'm going with this is here is where you get to feel what the payoff is for the burden that Magath shoulders. Magath is sheltering these kids. You gotta wonder what it would be like under any other commander. You need only look back at Grisha's childhood to see what could be happening to these children under another man's watch. It all helps cast a light on this fascinating duality and depth to Magath, and this episode really lets it shine through so well. One thing that seems curious to me, little aside, is the fact that this train comes out at all. I mean, why expose it to some kind of sneak attack when you could hold it in reserve? I might be overthinking it, but it popped in my head, so I wanted to at least bring it up. Interesting. The humanity of Marley's enemies comes through a little bit, as these soldiers are utterly reluctant to murder a surrendering, half-naked girl in cold blood. Here's where the show gets a little sneaky, because what Gabby is doing is completely wrong. But notice how the show first has the soldiers clearly decide to murder her while she's unarmed. It's easier for the audience to swallow what she's doing now that we know what they were about to do to her. Take 2 of the person runs in a straight line and survives by pure dumb luck trope. It does give Falco a chance to run after her, and not only does this suggest potential romantic interest, but it also gives us more insight into why he might be a great option to serve as a savior or armor titan. You also really get the feeling that perhaps Magath is running a daycare, poorly, with little kids running into traffic here under his watch. No way does this happen under another commander. I wonder what he's thinking at this moment, by the way. Perhaps leaving the kids the freedom to choose a quick death is much more preferable to suffering a harsh soldier's life. I mean, he did bring these kids to war. I'm sure he had to come to terms with the fact that he might lose a couple of them. Badass superhero moment coming up. Bam! Galliard, Cart Titan, shows up in a panel that fans have been dying to see on TV for years now. I gotta be honest though, I feel like by doing a panning shot, they really took out so much of the badass impact that a really well-drawn still image might have had. It's hard to suggest that they do a still image, 2D, hand-drawn, beautiful thing, then it would clash so much with the CGI that we're about to see. Unfortunately, this amazing panel falls at the merciless hands of CGI. Speaking of which, a lot of the CGI does flow nice and is integrated perfectly with 2D at different points. Here, though, very stiff, awkward, kind of like there's a frame rate difference, and it's very noticeable here. So this is definitely a shot that doesn't hold up under any sort of scrutiny compared to the rest of the animation. Now, I'd be remiss to ignore the detail of the bullet cracking his skull slightly, and the music also deserves a mention. It's nothing groundbreaking, but the fast pace combined with the rising notes really does a great job of setting the desperation, intensity, and tension. It's not just badass action, it's also the protection of these kids, the need to end the war, and the very real threat of danger that Magath communicated to us earlier. Actually, I wish we could have seen Magath maybe curse and call for Galliard. Something that kind of builds the audience anticipation, like, oh shit, someone's coming, he's gonna make it in time, who's coming, what's coming? And then when he finally shows up, oh my god, look at the Titan, it's so cool. Something else I love, while we're on the topic of music and sound effects, I love the choice to go with a more piercing gun sound effect, as opposed to the loud, explosive kind. And this little leaping sound effect takes me right back to the late 90s PlayStation era. It's the brevity and the sound of a slashing and suction, which all convey the speed and ferocity of the Jaw Titan's movements. Moving quickly, by the way, he looks really nice. Slowing down, like he does here, that's when it starts to feel a little too blocky again. Ditto with this scene. It's not so much that CGI is ugly to me, because, I still love Beast Wars, but you don't get to play as easily with elongating or flattening or blurring like you can with 2D animation, and I think that's unfortunate. And I hope you could sense that I'm not trying to hammer Studio Mappa, I'm not trying to overdo it with anger and all that, because it's not warranted. This is just minor critique, pointing out where some of the flaws stick out, but I understand the context of some of these flaws, the budgetary constraints, and overall what they've had to accomplish on the time that they had allotted to them. This is overall fantastic work. Holy shit! That is nightmare fuel. I can't be the only one who loves the way Titans are used in innovative ways, by the way. The Cart Titan, in particular, always seems to be used in unique and inventive ways. You gotta wonder, in the Attack on Titan universe, who exactly comes up with these things? Innovative Titan warfare. Well, that is exactly what we'll discuss in part 2 of this review. I apologize for splitting it, but it is fairly taxing to watch, write an 8-page script in a day, record voiceover, edit everything together, and do it all in just a handful of days. So I wanted to get part 1 out, take a breath, and then we'll cover the rest of the episode. Thank you so much for watching. If you feel this deserves it, please share this around. Suggest improvements in the comments. Let me know what you saw in this episode that I may have glossed over that you'd like to hear about. Maybe I'll be able to tackle that in part 2 for you. Give me your own review, or tear mine apart. More importantly, I know what we all came to see. Likes and subs in exchange for Titan nudes. Sasageo, motherfucker. Twitter music and links were applicable in the description below.